Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and we're here to talk about a program that's been created by the federal government for which there is a benefit for local governments and developments, and the county is, as a regional government, taking a role to assist the local governments in dealing with this program. I'm joined here today by our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins, our Director of Operations, Joan McDonald, our Director of Communications, Catherine Chaffee, and other representatives of our county administration. I'm also joined with us here, and she'll have a speaking role, our Director of Economic Development, Bridget Gibbons. We have also speaking today will be Vincent Ferrandino, who's the principal of Ferrandino and Associates, and he is on contract with the county to provide the services that we'll talk about. The mayor of the village of Portchester is with us, Fritz Falanka. The mayor of the city of White Plains, our good friend Tom Roch, is with us. We see each other every single day of our lives. Literally, I think we did 19 days in a row, and counting. We also are joined by the village manager of the village of Portchester, Chris Steers. We have with us also Frank Ferrari, who is a village trustee and also chair of the Portchester IDA, is with us here. We have Norma Drummond, who's our commissioner of planning, and we have Susan Ryder, who's project manager for New Rochelle's IDA and downtown development programs. And again, as we're joined by other individuals, we'll be happy to recognize them. I'm going to wait just a second for our friends to continue on. Good, ready to go. Okay. Continuing with just introductions of the folks who are here with us. The announcement today precedes a meeting that we will have as soon as this press conference is over to discuss the Opportunity Zones program and to indicate how Westchester County hopes to help those 8 communities that have been designated with Opportunity Zones help implement the program. Bridget Gibbons is going to talk a little bit about what we're going to have in terms of the meeting in a few minutes, and then Vince Ferrandino, who is a professional for many, many years in planning and development. He has served in the chief development planning jobs for the town of Greenburgh and the city of Mount Vernon, high in the Peekskill organization as well, so he has inside government municipal experience, but also as a consultant for a long period of time on a host of different complicated projects. He will be talking specifically about what the Opportunity Zone program represents and how that's part of the development mix. From a broad generalist standpoint, our new administration, still new, almost a year and a half in, has believed that the county government must be a partner to local governments. And that may or may not have always been the case in the past, but it's certainly part of our philosophy. Both Ken Jenkins and I have served in government positions before we got into this position, and we think that the partnership from the county ought to be easy and cooperative with our municipal governments, particularly those villages and towns that, because of the size of their government, are not able to have on staff all of the expertise that they would like to have. And there are communities like Yonkers and Mount Vernon, White Plains, and New Rochelle that have certain size and scope, but there are other communities like Sleepy Hollow and Portchester that are not of the same size and scope. And so the county ought to be able to be there to assist, particularly when we have, in the case of Opportunity Zones, a program that carries real benefit for real estate developers, but involves a certain degree of specific work and understanding the complexities of real estate finance that we can best do when we do it jointly. And this is part of a process that's been ongoing. We recently reestablished, under the leadership of Commissioner Drummond, the Community Development Block Grant Program. A week ago, we had a press conference in Elmsford where we announced $3.5 million that the federal government has awarded the Westchester County Urban Consortium, made up of 25 communities. That consortium existed and was dissolved at the time that we were in a detailed lawsuit with the federal government over housing. But we've reestablished that. And in the act of reestablishing it, the benefit of CDBG funds goes to the municipalities, not to the county. But the county sees its role as a partner with the municipal governments. We have a proposal we've talked about quite extensively for additional revenue for sales tax, and we have a plan which, if it's signed into law by the governor, will represent a 30% share of the additional revenue to the municipal governments. And that is a sign, again, of our willingness to partner. So this effort, in essence, and what we're doing is we have a professional contracted with us who will serve as a liaison with the local governments, those 8 communities that have opportunity zones, and be able to sit and work with them and help them implement the program. Now, it matters what development is going to go on in these areas, but in essence, this is a way to help incentivize developments in impacted census tracts across the country, of course, but for our purposes in our backyard. The areas for which economic development is most needed, and hopefully will have the greatest effect in terms of jobs and improvement of life. So I'm going to ask Bridget Gibbons, our Director of Economic Development, to talk a little bit about what today's meeting is, and then we'll bring up Vince Ferrandino to talk about the Opportunity Zones program. When we're completed with that, we'll take any questions as a group, and then you're welcome to interview the individuals behind me one-on-one after we complete that. And then when we go down the hallway to our meeting, you're welcome to participate in the meeting, get B-roll, or listen to the proceedings. It's an open public meeting, so you're welcome to attend it from there. So let me invite Bridget Gibbons to the microphone. Bridget?
Good morning, everyone. The Opportunity Zones program is really designed to drive investment and revitalize economically distressed communities with private investment. With the county executives' leadership, today we are meeting with mayors and supervisors and planning directors and commissioners from the 8 municipalities in Westchester that have designated opportunity zones. The goal of the session today is to provide more detail on the program because it's really new and not thoroughly understood. Additionally, we want to provide information to these leaders on how they can actively maximize literally these opportunities. We want to provide guidance on where they can find information on opportunity funds that are in the area and how to proactively position their zones so that their priorities and objectives for the census tracts that are designated are met. We thank the county executive for convening this session, and we hope it will be of real value to those that are participating. Thank you.
I should point out that there are 8 communities in Westchester County, 8 municipalities that have 12 zones altogether, which are designated. The municipalities are the town of Cortlandt, the town of Mount Pleasant, the city of Mount Vernon, the city of New Rochelle, the city of Peekskill, the village of Portchester, the city of White Plains, and the city of Yonkers. And as I mentioned previously, we have representatives of the village of Portchester and the city of White Plains here, so you can talk about the specifics of what areas have been set aside. Next, I'm going to ask Vince Ferrandino to share his thoughts. Vince is a planning professional with, I don't know if I want to put the number of years on it, Vince, a number of decades of experience. We start to date ourselves now if I put the number there. But we have the good fortune of having Vince and members of his team with us as consultants to do different types of projects. And this is one that he brought our attention to. There was a public forum held by the Business Council of Westchester within the last 2 months on this topic, but the link that Vince will provide will be an ongoing dialogue with the various local governments to help them manage this program in a way that would be productive and will actually get the development, hopefully, that we're looking for. So, Vince?
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see all of you here. A lot of familiar faces. As George and Bridget indicated, the Opportunity Zone program has been much ballyhooed, but there's a lot of confusion over what it can actually do. It is not a tax subsidy program. It is a program basically wherein investor developers can benefit tax-wise from investments that they previously made by investing in the eligible opportunity zones throughout the country. There are about 8,000 opportunity zones or census tracts in the country, and in New York State there are about 600. And as George and Bridget mentioned, right here in Westchester there are 8 communities that will benefit with basically 10 zones. Some of the zones are really anomalies when you look at it. For example, when you compare a distressed census tract in Mount Vernon with the tract in the town of Cortlandt, which basically, because of the demographics and statistics, is the VA Medical Center, and it has low-income poverty statistics. The same would apply to the census tract, if you will, in the town of Mount Pleasant, which covers most of what we know as the North 60. And the reason that that tract was designated is because of the county jail. So there are some quirks in the program that are problematic that I believe are going to be worked out in the next couple of months. Essentially, it's a demand-side program. Developers who have money to invest and want to receive tax benefits would typically come into a distressed tract, let's say in the city of New Rochelle. In the city of New Rochelle, the 2 tracts are in and around the downtown. There's a lot of vacant land. There are a lot of development opportunities. The city of New Rochelle has done its planning. They have a master plan. They have a master developer. The city of New Rochelle is pretty much ready to go in terms of what they need. And I'm sure, given the staff, and Susan Ryder is here from the city of New Rochelle, they're sufficiently sophisticated, if you will, probably to handle the zone on their own. However, some of the smaller communities may not be able to do that, and that's where the county is coming in, and hopefully my firm and my staff will be of assistance. And in the workshop that we're going to proceed with this morning, there'll be a presentation on the Opportunity Zone program, the mechanics of the zone, and that type of thing. But more importantly would be the hands-on, one-on-one consultation with the individual municipalities who may have questions on how it's working, what can they do in their particular zone, et cetera. And hopefully there'll be some follow-up one-on-one meetings with those communities. The Tax and Jobs Cut Act of December of 2017 is the genesis of this program. Everyone thinks it's a relatively new program. It is not. It's been around for about a year and a half. However, the IRS just finalized its regulations 2 months ago, and from what Norma Drummond tells me, HUD is still trying to figure out what their particular role is going to be in administering the program. It's not a federal program like CDBG or HOME or anything like that. It's basically, as I said, it's a program wherein investors have an opportunity to invest either in an existing property, an existing business, vacant land, etc., within the distressed tracts. Whatever they invest in that particular area, in terms of whatever that amount is, if they hold that property for 5, 7, or 10 years, they can get up to a 100% tax deferral. That's a tremendous incentive for any developer to basically invest, hold the property, and at the end of the day, not pay any taxes on the investment. How does it benefit the community? Obviously, these are distressed tracts in each of these municipalities. The communities, I'm sure, will be proactive in terms of attracting these developers, but more importantly, and this is a point that I'm going to stress today at the workshop, the communities have to have their own plan in place. What do the communities want the developers to do? Now, the developers can do technically whatever they want to do within the law. They can invest and do whatever they want. But if a community is focused on encouraging, for example, affordable housing in the particular zone, that's something that the community can do in partnership with the municipality. And it's not only basically introducing them to property owners and that type of thing, it's assisting in the processing, fast-track processing if necessary. It's basically making information available as to what property may be available not only by the municipality, but through various realtors and agencies like the Industrial Development Agency have an inventory of those properties that are potentially developable. The bad news about the Opportunity Zone program, unless they amend the regulations, is that the investments must be made by December 31st of this year. Now, I'm hoping that that's going to be extended, but there is no guarantee at this point. So the investor has to form what's called an opportunity fund, and by the way, that can be with not-for-profits as well, so that's a good thing. They invest in the opportunity fund. That money then is transferred into the municipality in terms of whatever that investment is going to be, and then the IRS monitors it over a period of time to make sure they comply with the regulations. Westchester County has been very helpful in providing technical assistance to communities, sometimes going way beyond what typical counties do. For example, Norma's department has been very helpful in the Urban County program. It's revitalized again, and in addition to doling out the money from the federal government to CDBG, the county provides ongoing technical assistance to those communities in terms of mapping, in terms of other advice on federal programs. The Opportunity Zone program is another tool in the arsenal, if you will, this time administered by the Office of Economic Development, again, providing technical assistance when it's needed and when it's requested. Nothing will be forced upon anyone. It's basically advice that's going to be provided. We can assist, we meaning my firm and other sources, can assist in introducing developer investors to the municipalities. We've been working with a number of investors outside of Westchester County, so we will help encourage them to come into the individual community. At the end of the day, the communities that are eligible are technically distressed. The determination of how the zones were selected was by the state of New York in consultation with the communities. So some communities may say, for example, the village of Sleepy Hollow, they are not an eligible zone. They probably should be. Their downtown is distressed, but technically they don't meet the criteria that defines a distressed tract. So I think that's somewhat problematic as well, and in a sense it might put Sleepy Hollow at a slight disadvantage to Peekskill, because Peekskill has a zone and Sleepy Hollow doesn't. But that doesn't mean that investors will not come to Sleepy Hollow. I think Sleepy Hollow is doing certain things that are very positive on its own that may not necessarily need an opportunity zone. Cities like Yonkers, who I don't believe are represented here today other than Ken Jenkins, resident of Yonkers, I think are going it on their own. From what I understand, they retain their own consultant. I guess they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and they probably don't need the county's assistance. But other than Yonkers, I think the 7 other zones, if you will, again, if they would like to invite the county in, we are very happy to work along with those communities. So other than that, I don't want to bore you with statistics and data. We can get into that. But other than that, I think if some of you can hang around for the roundtable, it'll be in nuts and bolts, back and forth. And we have a detailed PowerPoint, for example, on the zone program, the components, what's a quality, an opportunity zone fund, how does it work, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really for later this morning. But other than that, I think we're okay. Thank you so much.
Stick around, there may be some questions that
Yeah.
we'll ask
Yeah.
you. I'm sure there'll be one or two. Let me give the prerogative to our 2 elected chief officials the chance to say a few words. Mayor Falenka, if you'd like to share a few thoughts, and then Mayor Roch. Mayor Roch.
Hello, I'm Mayor Roch. No, this is, we have a lot happening in White Plains, as I think everyone can see. For me, this is another tool in our toolbox. And actually, some of the properties that are part of our zone are actually city-owned properties that we plan for development. So actually, this is another component we can tout when we talk to potential developers of the sites. And so there's some excitement around this, and we look forward to working with our colleagues. And as the county executive pointed out, I literally see him every day. I see probably Ken Jenkins twice a day. And you know, just today at the farmer's market, I'll see half of the rest of the people. So we do work very well together. It's a very collegial relationship, and I think to the benefit of the residents of White Plains and the county of Westchester. So I want to thank the county executive for organizing this today, and I look forward to working and partnering with the county on this.
Thank you, Tom. Fritz?
Thank you, and thank you, George, for organizing this today. The village of Portchester, practically the entire village is in an opportunity zone. So we're here today with our staff, our village manager, our director of planning, to gather more information with what the opportunity zone can be for the village of Portchester. So we're very anxious to attend the classes this morning and hopefully bring some good information back to the Board of Trustees that will benefit the village of Portchester. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. So we'll open it up to any questions from our friends in the media. Any issues they'd like to ask directed to any individual if they'd like. Mark?
So there were some concerns when the program came out that the money would kind of be funneled to areas that already have investment and maybe speed up gentrification and stuff like that. What has the county done in terms of analyzing that?
Well, keep in mind that the zones were identified, as Vince said, by the state of New York. The county was not the designating factor. And I think, as Vince has pointed out, this program is probably going to undergo any number of tweaks as we go forward. This is really the beginning. I think we're one of the counties that are on the cutting edge of trying to help implement it. Because, again, we're a convener of the efforts. It's not, as was said, it's not money that's being transferred. It is a tax benefit that will occur over a certain period of time. So I think what we'll probably see is, as the program starts to roll forward, what problems there are in the program and how it's structured will feed back to the feds. HUD, I guess, is implementing the program, so therefore they will have a certain amount of executive discretion on how they handle it, and then whether or not there's going to be additional zones identified going forward. I mean, the short-term answer to what Vince pointed out is that if we see other areas that we think should qualify for this, then we'll certainly make the recommendation of other ones that we think could be designated. I don't know, Vince, if you want to add to any of that.
Yeah, if I will. The program basically is a free market program, if you will. It's not a tax subsidy program. It's not a tax abatement program. It's basically the federal government to the IRS providing tax benefits. The communities can take charge, if you will, in a very subtle way, in a cooperative way with developers by providing other incentives to the developers. For example, if you are in an eligible opportunity zone, You're eligible for low-income housing tax credit consideration for low and moderate income housing. You're eligible for something called new market tax credits, which is a tremendous incentive. If you have some historic properties in the zone, as the city of Peekskill does, and I think the village of Portchester, you're eligible for historic tax credits. So there are other things that the municipality and the state can provide to support the developer. But again, it's a quid pro quo. The county is very concerned about the whole issue of displacement and gentrification. Not that gentrification is a nasty word. It can be very positive if it's directed in the right way. The areas that were chosen are distressed. So they probably can use a little bit of gentrification. But again, there's a balance. You want to make sure that the people who are living and working in those zones are protected. And that's where the county and the individual municipalities basically can play a vital role in negotiating with the developers. So again, it's up to the developers, it's up to the municipality really to come together, and at the end of the day, they still have to get approvals for probably most of what they want to do. So there's always the planning board, and there's always a zoning board in the municipality that has some control, and the village board or the mayor and council. So there are some issues where there can be control, but the key word, I think, and George mentioned it and Bridget mentioned it, is cooperation. This has to be a cooperative program where everybody benefits at the end of the day.
Other questions?
Please elaborate a little bit on how do you define what a distressed zone is?
Vince, could you
Yeah,
reference
there are basic criteria in terms of, for example, income data, low and moderate income data, unemployment data, homeless data. It's all stipulated in the Jobs and Tax Cut Act. Typically, if you look at the zones, you're familiar with them if you've done any work in Westchester County at all. You know, it's basically parts of downtown Portchester. It's basically in the heart of downtown Mount Vernon, in an existing urban renewal area on South 4th Avenue. In Peekskill, it's Census Tract 143, which is basically Park Street, going from the east side of the city almost to the river. It's fairly extensive, and it's fairly flexible, but the criteria are based upon primarily income, condition of housing, et cetera, et cetera.
And just to be clear, if an investor invests in a property and hold it for 5 years, they can pretty much wind up not paying any taxes on that?
If they hold it for 5 years, they're entitled to a 15% deferral. If they hold it for 7 years, they're entitled to a 25% deferral. If they hold it for 10 years, they're entitled to a 100% deferral. So there's a tremendous incentive to stick with that property. If at any time before the 5 years is up, if you will, they realize no benefit. So it's not a situation of a quick hit. We're coming in, we're going to flip it. No, there's no flipping. It retains in the ownership of the opportunity fund, if you will. So there are some protections built in, and the IRS basically is going to be the monitor of what occurs. So far, I mean, again, it's still untested. It's largely untested in New York State. I mean, I've been following this around the country, and the Midwest is taking tremendous advantage of it. California's taking advantage of it. We're sort of just waking up in New York State, and I think Westchester will be in the forefront here by basically being proactive and trying to work with the communities.
And Vince, clarify that we're talking about federal tax burden, federal
Yes.
income tax burden, not property tax.
No, not property tax, not whatsoever. If the right,
Capital gains.
right, yeah. Yeah. It's deferral of federal income tax,
Capital gains.
capital gains.
Any other questions?
When will this all be going into, I guess, effect, and when will it start happening?
Well, the program's been in effect technically since December of 2017, but in effect, most investor developers were waiting for the IRS regulations to be finalized, which is about 2 months ago. So technically, in the last couple of months, a whole slew of opportunity funds are being formed around the country, mostly by large developers. I mean, RXR Realty, for example, in New Rochelle, they're basically the master developer. They formed their own opportunity fund. So I expect that Susan's going to be very busy in New Rochelle, working at least with RXR and perhaps some others. The smaller investors, it's a little bit more of a challenge for the smaller investors, but I think as the program continues and they'll catch on, they'll probably hook up with the big boys, or they'll hook up with a not-for-profit, or both. So again, and that's where we can be helpful by basically marrying some of the entities that are involved in the program.
Okay. With that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Michelle. You get the final word.
Okay, yeah. You said the investments have to be made by,
Yes,
According to the
According-
current regs.
that's correct.
As they're structured now, and I
Right.
think you pointed out that the expectation is that there'll be an effort to extend that. And that's federal policy, not county or local policy.
Is that just for the 10-year hold or for the entire thing?
The entire program. Yeah.
Mark?
You've been very critical of the administration, President Trump. Are you saying that this program, that you support this program?
Yes, I support this program. There are other parts of that bill I don't support, such as the salt deduction loss. And I think that shows balance, that you can agree when there's something to agree with, and there's something to dispute when there's something to dispute. It's not an automatic disagreement on everything. However, it's fair to say that this program, to be established in December of 2017 and have IRS regs in April of 2019 isn't the speediest way to implement it. So we're trying to stay on the front end of it, and clearly asking Vince and his team, Jerry Post from his team is with us today, there are others involved, is because we want to see this thing move as quickly as we can for the benefit of the municipal governments.
And by the way, country clubs are not eligible for investment. That, believe it or not, that's specifically stated in the act, so that's the good news.
Mayor Roch, can you say specifically where in White Plains, some of these distressed properties?
So it'd be easier to do with a map, but the most commonly known would be the Galleria is in there. So there's really not there's not much housing currently in our. There's some, but there's not much housing currently in our zone. The Bronx Street lot, which is part of the land at our train station, the southern end of the parking at the train station, which is part of an RFP that is out right now for development. Oh, and that's another significant. And then I just got handed the map, so I'll get my bearings. So the area near White Plains Hospital, where there's some development going on. So it's basically running from Hamilton Avenue down past White Plains Hospital, and but I think that the most prominent area that you'd think about would be the Galleria, and there is some development activity with regard to the Galleria right now, and so.
Mayor Falana?
Yes, the areas that I believe are defined in Portchester, probably the entire village except for the area where the Cold Shopping Center is off the US 1 Boston Post Road, and the single-family homes on the Route 1 corridor. Other than that, everything is in an opportunity zone for Portchester. And I'm sorry, thank you, and the United Hospital property.
Okay, we're going to thank you very much for your time. Feel free to interview anybody individually before we start our meeting. You're welcome to join the meeting. Thanks. Thank you all very much. Thank you for being here.